If you can imagine that, you're in water and you go under. Most people, they struggle to the top, and when they get to the top, they may be at the end of their breath. They just get out and they can breathe. Well, end-stage pulmonary fibrosis, it feels like you never reach the top. When I was diagnosed, Phil, the respirologist said to me, well, my friend, you have pulmonary fibrosis. I thought, yeah, okay, so what? Thank you very much. And he said, have you ever been around coal mines? No. Been around birds? I said, I had a budgie once. He said, you've been around asbestos? No. He said, well, in that case, what you have is what we call idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is pulmonary fibrosis of unknown cause. And if you Google it go on the internet and Google it, you'll frighten yourself to death. I took that as an instruction. So I went on the internet and did Google it. And I didn't frighten myself to death because sometimes I'm too stupid to know when I'm in trouble. But I did find out that life expectancy was 3 to 5 years. I also noticed some people went for 18 years. So being smart, I chose the 18-year option. So it wasn't that scary to me because I'd never heard of it. When I told my wife, she was petrified because her friend or one of her work colleagues had passed away from it the year before, and I'd forgotten all about that. So it was pretty hard on my wife to find out that way. It is progressive disease. It's also very unpredictable. So it progresses for various reasons, and you have exacerbations. In my case, it seemed to be become more problematic after I got a cold, which went to my chest. That was in January 2009, so that's when I decided to take a few trips. I went to Yunnan province in southwest China. 12,500 feet up in the foothills of the Himalayas was too high. You don't do that when you've got pulmonary fibrosis. I went to Scotland, and then in August, as time went on during 2009, it got progressively worse and worse. So that I had decided to start the Canadian Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation, and this pushed me into really getting it going. So in October 2009, I established the foundation. The purposes of it were to provide support to Canadian pulmonary fibrosis patients and to raise money for research. Because when I went onto the internet after I was diagnosed to look up and find some support, there was nothing in Canada. There was 2 US foundations that had been established 5 or 7 years before, but they were too busy to deal with the Canadian people, so we didn't get any response from them. And I also found out that there was very little money being used for research, $3 million outside the pharma companies. So I established that in October 2009, but then I got another problem in November, and went down further, and I ended up on oxygen. Pretty moderate flow, 6 liters of flow, and then in November it had gone even further because I got another cold, and then I was in a wheelchair. Going in a wheelchair at Christmas is not too bad because you're down at the level of the little kiddies at Christmas time, and they're kind of fun, and you're driving past them or being pushed past them. In January, or over Christmas, I got worse again and ended up in emergency at Markham Stowell Hospital. And that's when my respirologist decided to try and expedite the transplant program. He contacted Toronto General, and I was very fortunate with him because on December the 28th, at 8 o'clock in the evening, he called me and said I'm to stop taking the Plavix, which I take for my heart, because they don't like blood flowing all over the place in an operation. So this is good news, even though I wasn't officially on the list. January, it progressed even more. So now I was basically sitting at home. It took me 2 hours in the morning to get up, because everything you do, you never have enough breath. Walking from one place to another, I'd need somewhere to sit down every 2 meters, because that's as far as I could get. And then this is end-stage pulmonary fibrosis. And it's very difficult to describe that feeling of being that far gone, that, you know, death is imminent. And it was very, very tough on my wife. You know, I'm sitting around dying, and that's not too difficult, but she's sitting around watching me die, and that's horrendous for anybody to be able to put in that position. January the 19th, I got a call to meet with the doctor at Toronto General, the transplant doctor. And he did a couple of tests, asked me some questions, and made me sign some forms. He said, now you're officially on the list. So that's probably the best news I'd had in a long, long time. But it's not the end, because he said, you know, you could be waiting 18 months. Well, I knew 18 months was really not an option, because I knew how bad I was. I still didn't give up, though. You know, you can never give up on this disease. You let it win, because something might happen. In my case, it did. When you're listed for a transplant, the Toronto General requires you to enter a lung rehab program. Part of it is to make sure the lungs stay as good as they can while you're alive, and the second part is to make sure you're as fit as possible for a very, very tough operation. It's 8 hours long. So they asked me to attend on the 24th to go to the lung physio room at Toronto General, at which time I was going to go through the program to find out what exercises they wanted me to do. Basically, they did a little demo on the treadmill, the bike, the weights and the stretches, this sort of thing. And then they asked me to come back the following day to do the full program. The following day I went back. That was the Thursday, I guess the 27th or 28th of January. And I was unable to do it. They put me on a 12-litre flow of oxygen, and I managed about 5 minutes on the treadmill at half a mile an hour before the oxygen plummeted to below 70%. Most normal people are 95, 98. The bike wasn't too bad. I managed about 8 minutes on that. And again, they got so alarmed with the decline in oxygen saturation that the nurse clinician came in and took a look and immediately stopped all the exercise program. The good news came on the Friday night, early Saturday morning, when I got the call at 12:23. They said, this is Robert Davidson, yes. Can you tell us, have you got any fever? No. We've been offered lungs. Do you want them? And I thought that was probably the daftest question I've ever heard in my life. You know, does a dying patient want new lungs? So I said, yeah, I'll take them, thank you. So an hour and a half later, I checked into the emergency at Toronto General. So it's about 1:30, 1:45, where they did all the tests and said, yep, you're okay for a transplant. And then we sat around and waited. You know, it's quite amazing when they made the call. It's, you know, as I said earlier, it took me 2 hours to get ready in the morning. This time it only took me about 20 minutes. I think the adrenaline rush may have helped. So 8:30 in the morning, they wheeled me into the operating room. And the only thought I had on the way down was, if I don't come through this operation, Heather's going to kill me. So, strange thought. Anyway, I did it, and the result was absolutely magical. They pulled the intubator tube out, and then I was breathing, all on my own. The lungs were doing the job. It wasn't me trying to make the lungs work. It was the lungs doing it on their own. It's a fantastic feeling if you haven't been able to breathe for months and work at it. So that was the 30th of January 2010. And then I spent one day in the ICU, one day in the step-down ICU, and the third day I was in a regular ward, which is pretty quick. And on the third day, I guess the Tuesday, they came around and said, would I like to start the exercise program? Fine. So I did a 600-meter walk around the ward, and the oxygen never went below 98. This was something that hadn't happened for months. over a year and a half, and it's a fantastic feeling. So that was the end of my trip with IPF. The lung transplant trip is a whole new story, and you know, you're really only trading one chronic disease for another. You know, I'm on a strict regimen of immunosuppressant drugs and good stuff like that. But the lung transplant is fantastic. However, I'd still like to make it so that the lung transplant isn't the only resort. You know, we need a cure for this disease, and we need people to find the causes. We need to find treatments and cures. So that's what I'm working for now. Well, as you know, I attended and CPFF sponsored the ICLAF 2014, and I was really impressed with the commitment of so many scientists from around the world to research the disease and eventually find the causes. Unfortunately, while they've eliminated a lot of stuff and have found a lot of genes that do have an effect on IPF, we still have no idea what the cause is. The magic button hasn't been found yet. I am satisfied with the work that those researchers are doing. I'm not satisfied with the amount of money that Canada is putting into research. They need to put much more money into this. It's a disease that's killing 5,000 Canadians a year, which is the same number as breast cancer and pancreatic cancer and some other major diseases, but the death rate is far higher than those diseases. It's 100%. And we know that research works. We just need the money to do it. If research didn't work, we wouldn't have AIDS as a chronic disease instead of a killer disease. We wouldn't have so many people surviving breast cancer or prostate cancer. So we need that money for research. So while I'm satisfied with what the scientists are doing, I'm dissatisfied with the amount of support they get from the Canadian government and other bodies to fund this research. You know, when I find out that because we've given 500,000 to research, we're considered an important body, I think that's ridiculous. You know, if we were given 50 million, then I'd say that's important. So we need that sort of money committed to research in Canada.
Canada.
IPF education from patients, we're doing a fine job. IPF education for physicians and clinicians is not to the standard I would expect. There's very few specialized units, there are very few IPF specialists. There are many respirologists who aren't up to speed. There's a lot of family doctors who don't know how to recognize that the patient may have IPF. You know, it's very simple to be alerted to Velcro sounds in the lungs. Family physicians should be taught to look for that when a patient comes in short of breath and to listen for it and then refer to the proper place. So I'd like to see far more education for respirologists, family doctors. I'd like to see more ILD units across the country. There's a shortage. The Atlantic provinces have probably 2 IPF specialists. Saskatchewan's got 1 or 2, and it's just there's not enough knowledgeable physicians out there on this disease. And early diagnosis is essential so that whatever treatments are available will help. They work better on the patients that are not so far advanced. The patients themselves are learning about it. There's information on the website since we started, but the doctors aren't keeping up to speed in all cases. Yeah, if you're recently diagnosed, you may not know about it then, but you know, you need to be referred to an ILD unit. It's absolutely essential. The progress in this disease, the knowledge of the disease is advancing very quickly, and the physicians at the ILD units are best placed to get that information and therefore use it for the assistance of patients. Maybe it's just that they can have so much more knowledge that the patient feels more comfortable. maybe they got access to the clinical trials that other respirologists may not know about. So the primary advice we give to all patients is get yourself referred. And if the respirologist won't refer you to the ILD unit, then ask your family doctor to do it, because it's essential they get there. As I said before, I'm sometimes too stupid to know when I'm in trouble. And I am a very positive person, so yeah, I was determined that I would either get a lung transplant or somebody would find a treatment that worked for me. My wife and family were very supportive, and I kept doing the same things that I was doing before I was sick. You know, I never stopped doing it. I go for an attitude adjustment hour at the local, made sure I got up in the morning and shaved and showered and, you know, did all those necessary things to maintain as much normalcy as possible, because if you give up, the disease wins. And so, you know, you stay positive. And the first transplant, the successful lung transplant, was done in Canada in 1983, and the reason that patient was selected was because of his positive attitude to the disease and how he would survive it. So you just keep on as if life is the same, even if you can't breathe too well.